A poor schoolteacher opened her door one morning to find Elvis Presley standing on her porch with car keys in his hand. She hadn't seen him in years. She had no idea he'd become famous. But Elvis had never forgotten the woman who helped him when he had nothing. What happened next would become one of the most documented acts of gratitude in music history and prove that Elvis Presley never forgot where he came from. It was the fall of 1955 in Tupelo, Mississippi, and Mrs. Oleta Grimes was getting ready for another day of teaching at East Tupelo Consolidated School. She was 52 years old, had been teaching for over 30 years, and lived modestly in a small house on the edge of town. Her husband had passed away a few years earlier, leaving her with a mortgage she struggled to pay on a teacher's salary. That particular morning, as she was having her coffee and preparing her lesson plans, she heard a car pull up outside. This wasn't unusual, neighbors sometimes stopped by, but when she looked out the window, her heart nearly stopped. There was a pink Cadillac parked in front of her house, and standing beside it, grinning like a boy who'd just pulled off the best surprise in the world, was Elvis Presley. Mrs. Grimes hadn't seen Elvis in years. The last time she'd taught him was back in 1946, when he was just an 11-year-old boy in her 5th grade class. A quiet, shy boy from one of the poorest families in Tupelo. A boy who often came to school in clothes that were too small or too worn. A boy who sometimes looked like he hadn't eaten breakfast. And now here he was, nearly 20 years old, wearing fancy clothes, driving a car that cost more than she made in 5 years, standing on her porch like no time had passed at all. Mrs. Grimes opened the door, her hand shaking. "Elvis? Elvis Presley?" "Yes, ma'am," Elvis said, taking off his sunglasses and giving her that shy smile she remembered. "I know it's been a long time, Mrs. Grimes. I hope I'm not bothering you?" "Bothering me? Elvis, I heard you'd become a singer, but I didn't know you were famous." "Well, I don't know about famous, but I'm doing all right. May I come in, ma'am?" Mrs. Grimes ushered him inside, her mind racing. She'd heard Elvis's songs on the radio over the past year. "That's All Right," "Blue Moon of Kentucky," and more recently, "Baby, Let's Play House." She knew he was having success, but she had no idea he'd become wealthy enough to afford a car like that. They sat in her modest living room, and for a few minutes they caught up. Elvis asked about her life, about the school, about other students she'd taught. He was polite, respectful, calling her ma'am the way he always had. But Mrs. Grimes could see there was something else on his mind, something he'd come to say. Finally, Elvis cleared his throat and said, "Mrs. Grimes, I need to tell you something. I need to tell you what you did for me back when I was in your class." "What I did?" "Elvis, I heard you'd become a singer, but I didn't know you were famous." Well, I don't know about famous, but I'm doing all right. May I come in, ma'am?" Mrs. Grimes ushered you inside, her mind racing. She'd heard Elvis's songs on the radio over the past year. "That's All Right," "Blue Moon of Kentucky," and more recently, "Baby, Let's Play House." She knew he was having success, but she had no idea he'd become wealthy enough to afford a car like that. They sat in her modest living room, and for a few minutes they caught up. Elvis asked about her life, about the school, about other students she'd taught. He was polite, respectful, calling her ma'am the way he always had. But Mrs. Grimes could see there was something else on his mind, something he'd come to say. Finally, Elvis cleared his throat and said, "Mrs. Grimes, I need to tell you something. I need to tell you what you did for me back when I was in your class." "What I did? Elvis, I was just your teacher. I didn't do anything special." "Yes, you did," Elvis said, his voice becoming emotional. "You did something I've never forgotten, something that changed my life." He leaned forward, his hands clasped together. You remember that day in 5th grade when I came to school and I hadn't eaten breakfast? When you saw me looking at the other kids' lunches during the break?" Mrs. Grimes's eyes filled with tears. She did remember. It had been a cold winter day in 1946. Elvis had come to school obviously hungry, and during the lunch break, she'd noticed him watching the other children eat with a look of longing that broke her heart. "I remember," she whispered. "You took me aside, and you said you'd packed too much lunch and would I help you eat it so it wouldn't go to waste. You gave me half your sandwich, an apple, and some cookies. And you did it in a way that didn't make me feel ashamed or like I was taking charity." Elvis's voice cracked. "But that wasn't even the most important thing you did. After that day, you started doing it regularly. You'd always say you'd packed too much or that you weren't hungry or that the food would go bad if someone didn't eat it. You fed me, Mrs. Grimes, for months. You kept me from going hungry, and you did it in a way that let me keep my dignity." Mrs. Grimes was crying now. "Elvis, you were such a sweet boy. You were so thin, and I knew your family was struggling. I couldn't just let you go hungry." "But you did more than that," Elvis said. "You saw me. When I felt invisible, when I felt like I didn't matter because I was poor and my clothes were shabby and I didn't have the things other kids had, you saw me. You treated me like I was important, like I was worth your time and attention." He pulled out a handkerchief and wiped his eyes. "I never forgot that, Mrs. Grimes. Even when things got hard, even when I felt like giving up on everything, I remembered that there was at least one person who thought I was worth caring about. And that got me through." Mrs. Grimes reached over and took his hand. "Elvis, you were always worth caring about. You were a special boy. I could see it even then." "Well," Elvis said, composing himself and smiling, "I'm here today because I want to say thank you. I want to show you that your kindness didn't go to waste, that the boy you helped became someone who could make something of himself."
"Elvis, just seeing you doing well is thanks enough," Mrs. Grimes said. "I don't need anything else." "Well, that's good," Elvis said with a grin, "because I'm not giving you a choice about this next part." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of car keys. "Mrs. Grimes, that pink Cadillac outside? That's yours now. I bought it for you." Mrs. Grimes stared at him. "What? Elvis, no! I can't accept that. That car must have cost thousands of dollars." $15,000, actually," Elvis said casually. "And yes, you can accept it, because I'm not taking no for an answer." "But Elvis, I can't afford to maintain a car like that. The insurance alone." "Already paid for. Insurance, maintenance, everything, for the next 5 years. All taken care of." Mrs. Grimes was speechless, tears streaming down her face. "And there's more," Elvis said gently. "I know you've been struggling since Mr. Grimes passed away. I know you've got a mortgage on this house that's hard to manage on a teacher's salary. So I've paid it off. The house is yours, free and clear. You don't owe anyone anything." Mrs. Grimes couldn't speak. She just sat there, overwhelmed, trying to process what she was hearing. "Mrs. Grimes," Elvis said, his voice soft and sincere, "you gave me food when I was hungry. You gave me dignity when I felt worthless. You gave me hope when I had none. This is just me trying to give something back. It's not enough, it'll never be enough to repay what you did for me, but I hope you'll accept it anyway." Mrs. Grimes broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. Elvis moved to sit beside her and put his arm around her shoulders, letting her cry, understanding that these were tears of relief and gratitude and disbelief, all mixed together. When she finally composed herself, she looked at Elvis with wonder. "How did you know about my mortgage? How did you know I was struggling?" Elvis smiled sheepishly. "I might have called the school board and asked some questions, and I might have talked to some people around town. I wanted to make sure I was helping in the right way." "You've done more than help," Mrs. Grimes said. "You've changed my life. I was worried about losing this house. I was worried about how I'd manage when I retired, and now you don't have to worry," Elvis finished for her. "Now you can just teach because you love it, not because you have to. You can retire when you're ready and know you'll be taken care of." They spent the next hour together, with Elvis telling her about his career, his hopes, his dreams. Mrs. Grimes told him how proud she was of him, how she'd always known he was special. When Elvis finally left, he hugged her tight and said, "Thank you, Mrs. Grimes, for everything, for seeing me when I was invisible, for caring when you didn't have to. You'll never know what that meant to me." As Elvis drove away in his own car, Mrs. Grimes stood on her porch looking at the pink Cadillac, still not quite believing it was real. Her neighbors were already starting to gather, wondering what was going on, why there was a Cadillac in Mrs. Grimes's driveway. Word spread quickly through Tupelo. Elvis Presley bought his old teacher a Cadillac. People came by Mrs. Grimes's house just to see it, to hear the story. And Mrs. Grimes told it, over and over, with tears in her eyes every time. "He remembered me," she would say. "After all these years, after becoming famous, after having money and success, he remembered a poor teacher who gave me half a sandwich." That tells you everything you need to know about who Elvis Presley really is. The story made the local newspaper, then the regional papers, and eventually it spread nationally. It became one of the first widely known stories about Elvis's generosity, setting a pattern that would continue for the rest of his life. But what many people didn't know was that Elvis's generosity to Mrs. Grimes didn't stop with the car and the mortgage. Over the years that followed, Elvis checked in on her regularly. He called her on holidays. He sent her money when he heard she needed something. When she finally retired from teaching in 1963, Elvis made sure she had a comfortable pension by quietly supplementing what the school district provided. When Mrs. Grimes got sick in the early 1970s and needed medical care that her insurance didn't fully cover, Elvis paid for everything. She never asked. He just found out through his connections in Tupelo and took care of it. And when Mrs. Grimes passed away in 1974, Elvis paid for her funeral and made sure it was beautiful. He couldn't attend in person. His fame made public appearances difficult, but he sent flowers and a note that said simply, "Thank you for teaching me that kindness matters more than anything. You changed my life. I hope I made you proud. Love, Elvis." The pink Cadillac that Elvis had given Mrs. Grimes was preserved by her family after her death. It eventually ended up in a museum in Tupelo, where it remains to this day. There's a plaque beside it that tells the story of the poor teacher and the famous student who never forgot her kindness. But the impact of Elvis's gesture went far beyond Mrs. Grimes herself. The story inspired other celebrities to remember the people who'd helped them before they were famous. It became a template for how success could be used to give back, to honor those who'd made a difference. Teachers across America heard the story and felt validated, reminded that their work mattered, that the kindness they showed to struggling students could change lives in ways they might never know. And for Elvis's fans, the story revealed something about their idol that made them love him even more. He was grateful, he was humble, and he never forgot where he came from.
In 1956, a year after giving Mrs. Grimes the Cadillac, Elvis gave an interview to a Memphis newspaper. The reporter asked him about the incident, asking if it was just a publicity stunt. Elvis's response was firm. "Mrs. Grimes gave me something when I had nothing. She didn't do it for recognition or reward. She did it because she had a good heart. And when I was able to give something back, I did it for the same reason, because it was the right thing to do, not because I wanted credit for it. The only reason anyone knows about it is because people saw the car and asked questions. I would have been happy to do it in secret." The reporter pressed further. "But surely you've given to many people. Why was Mrs. Grimes special?" Elvis thought for a moment before answering. "Because she saw me when I felt invisible. Because she gave me dignity when I felt worthless. Because she showed me that kindness exists in the world, even when you don't have money or status or anything to offer in return. That's a lesson that shaped everything I became. How could I not honor that?" Over the years, multiple people who knew both Elvis and Mrs. Grimes confirmed the story. Other students from that fifth-grade class remembered Mrs. Grimes's kindness to Elvis. School records showed Elvis's attendance and his family's poverty. The car dealership had records of Elvis purchasing the Cadillac. The county records showed the mortgage being paid off. It wasn't a legend or an exaggeration, it was simply true. A poor boy remembered the teacher who fed him, and when he could, he changed her life the way she'd changed his. The story also revealed something important about Elvis's character that would become evident throughout his life. He never forgot his roots. Despite his fame and wealth, he remembered what it was like to be poor, to be hungry, to feel like you didn't matter. And that memory made him generous in ways that went beyond just giving money. He gave dignity, recognition, and honor to people who'd helped him when he had nothing. Mrs. Grimes's daughter, Rebecca, who was a teenager when Elvis gave her mother the Cadillac, later shared her own memories of that time. "My mother cried for days after Elvis's visit. Not sad tears, happy tears. She'd been so worried about money, about losing our house, about what would happen when she got older. And Elvis took all those worries away in one morning." Rebecca continued, "But what meant the most to her wasn't the car or the house. It was that he remembered her, that he valued what she'd done. She'd spent her whole life teaching, often feeling like no one appreciated it, like she wasn't making a difference. And then Elvis showed her that she had made a difference, that her kindness had mattered. That's what she treasured most." The pink Cadillac became something of a local celebrity in Tupelo. Mrs. Grimes drove it proudly, and whenever anyone asked about it, she told the story, not to brag, but to illustrate a point she made to every class of students for the rest of her teaching career. Kindness always matters. You never know how a simple act of caring might change someone's life. I gave a hungry boy half a sandwich, and years later he remembered. That's the power of kindness. Other teachers at East Tupelo Consolidated School noticed a change after the Cadillac story became known. Students treated teachers with more respect, understanding that these underpaid, overworked educators might be helping someone who would go on to do great things. Teachers themselves felt renewed purpose, reminded that their work, though often thankless and underpaid, could have profound impacts. Elvis's mother, Gladys, was deeply moved when she learned what Elvis had done for Mrs. Grimes. She told friends, "That's my boy. He remembers where he came from. He remembers what it was like to be poor and hungry. And now that he has something, he's sharing it with the people who helped us when we had nothing. I'm so proud of him." Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, initially worried about the expense. $15,000 for a car, plus paying off a mortgage, was a lot of money, even for Elvis's growing income. But when Elvis explained why he'd done it, Vernon nodded and said, "You did right, son. You did right." The story of Elvis and Mrs. Grimes also had an unexpected impact on Elvis's career. While some critics had dismissed him as just another flash-in-the-pan teen idol, this story revealed depth and character that made people reconsider. Here was a young man who, despite sudden fame and wealth, had used his resources to honor someone who'd helped him when he was powerless. That suggested maturity and values that contrasted with the wild and rebellious image his performances sometimes projected. Interestingly, the pink Cadillac also became part of Elvis's signature style. After Mrs. Grimes's car got so much attention, Elvis became associated with pink Cadillacs, eventually owning several himself and giving them away to other people who'd helped him over the years. The pink Cadillac became a symbol of Elvis's generosity, his success, and his refusal to forget his roots. In the decades since Elvis's death, the story has been referenced countless times as an example of gratitude, humility, and using success to give back. Biographers point to it as evidence of Elvis's essential goodness beneath the complexities of his later life. Fans cite it as proof that their idol was as good-hearted as they wanted to believe. But perhaps the most powerful testament to the story's truth and impact came from the students Mrs. Grimes taught after Elvis's visit. Many of them went on to successful careers, and several have said that Mrs. Grimes's story about Elvis inspired them to remember and honor the people who helped them along the way. One former student, who became a doctor, established a scholarship fund for poor students in Mrs. Grimes's name, saying, "Mrs. Grimes taught me that kindness has power. Elvis taught me that success should be used to honor those who helped you achieve it. This scholarship is my pink Cadillac, my way of passing on what they both taught me." Today, at the Tupelo Museum where Mrs. Grimes' pink Cadillac is displayed, thousands of visitors each year stop to read the story. Many leave in tears. Some leave inspired to reconnect with teachers who helped them. Others are motivated to acts of generosity in their own lives. The plaque beside the car reads, "This 1955 pink Cadillac was given by Elvis Presley to his fifth-grade teacher, Mrs. Oleta Grimes, in gratitude for her kindness to him when he was a poor student. It represents not just a generous gift, but a powerful reminder that small acts of kindness can have profound impacts, and that true success is measured not by what you achieve, but by how you honor those who helped you along the way."
Elvis Presley would go on to give away hundreds of cars over his lifetime, to friends, to family, to strangers, to fans. He would donate millions to charity, help countless people in need, and use his fame and wealth to make a difference in many lives. But the pink Cadillac he gave to Mrs. Oleta Grimes in 1955 remains the most significant of all his gifts. Not because it was the most expensive or the most publicized, but because it was the first. It was the moment when Elvis, newly successful and barely out of poverty himself, chose to use his resources to honor someone who'd helped him when he had nothing. It set a pattern that would define him for the rest of his life. It showed the world who Elvis Presley really was, beneath the fame and the performances and the image. He was a boy from Tupelo who never forgot that a kind teacher had given him half a sandwich when he was hungry. And when he could, he gave her the world. That's not just generosity. That's gratitude. That's character. That's the real Elvis Presley. And that's why, more than 60 years after a pink Cadillac showed up in a teacher's driveway in Tupelo, Mississippi, people still tell this story with tears in their eyes and hope in their hearts, because it reminds us that kindness matters, that gratitude matters, and that success is most meaningful when it's shared with those who helped you achieve it. If this true story of gratitude and kindness moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Share this with someone who helped you along the way, a teacher, a mentor, a friend, and let them know they made a difference. Have you ever had someone help you when you needed it most? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more true stories about the power of kindness and gratitude.